when we look at Call of Duty, we look at it from the sense of the Call of Duty community, right? Like, we look at it and we see Call of Duty from a certain set of light. And all of the reviews that I normally watch or look at are people who are in the Call of Duty community. I wanted to look at a review of someone who is just a game reviewer and see what they had to say. So I think like the most popular game reviews probably on YouTube are from GamerRanks and the Before You Buys. So I wanted to see what Jake Baldino has to say about Black Ops 6.
Hey, and we're back with another episode of Before You Buy, that show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. And today we're talking about Black Ops 6. Yep, that's right. They're back with another one. They did it again. It's always online. It's this big, massive download. You know the gist and the problems at this point, but let's do what we usually do and dive in, breaking down the three big offerings here. Campaign, zombies, and multiplayer.
I like that they're going to talk about all of them. I've made a review for campaign and I've made a review for multiplayer. I'm not sure if I'm going to do one for zombies yet.
All in all, to get started, it is an entertaining and pretty fun package this year.
There you go.
As a disclaimer, though, of course, you probably know this, but here at GameRanks, we're not like big, sweaty Call of Duty esports pros.
That is why I want your review.
We all kind of just play them casually. We usually end up being out of practice in multiplayer because we all tend to switch up games so often. But we do check out all the campaigns, myself included, for some mindless fun. So let's just get started off with that.
This campaign is not mindless fun, I will say that.
This is spoiler free, and all this footage is captured on PS5. The campaign is straight up very good. It's much, much better than the tacked on mess that was Modern Warfare 3's, and a bit more interesting than Modern Warfare 2's. And really, it's just a good follow-up in story and just feeling to Black Ops Cold War.
Agreed.
But this time, it's 1991, it's a new era, Desert Storm is kicking off, so you form this ragtag group of soldiers from across the world to solve the mystery of a dangerous international force. You join up with Robert Redford, Adler, and then Woods, the classic guy, and a few others in a haunted ex-spy mansion hideaway. And this is where you walk around and you talk to colleagues and spend in-game.
Hear me out. What they should do is to get a seasonal story every single season, they should release a new update to the safe house, and you have to solve a new puzzle to get the next piece of story. I think that would be, because one of my favorite parts of the campaign was the safe house
currency to unlock these little perks to go into missions with. It's nice to get these little perks. It doesn't do a huge amount towards like customization or anything like that, but it's little things here and there. Ultimately, you're kind of always changing your equipment and you're always changing your tactics because scenarios change so frequently in the campaign and you don't always get a ton of ammo. So you're always just trying different stuff, but still having this little tiny bit of customization and then loadout customization in game, like, and throughout this mansion, it works. But you go to a board and you access these missions and they span the globe. And while at this far into it, it's not a lot we haven't seen before, it still manages to feel like it has some fresh energy.
It does.
Great shootouts in big, massive office rooms are often the highlight.
I'm surprised he hasn't mentioned anything about like the varying missions.
You know, like you got glass shattering, paper flying, pillars breaking down, all while you're sprinting and diving sideways with the new movement system and you're using explosive RC cars and throwing knives. It's got the fun factor. And the 90s make for a pretty good setting. You get snippets of good music, you see Bill Clinton, and of course you eventually end up in Iraq during Desert Storm. For a bit, the game will give you some open-ended missions where you're free to tackle it how you want. For example, you're in Iraqi desert in open conflict and it's up to you to destroy 3 targets however you want. So you can snipe and stealth your way in, plant a C4 and blow it up. It feels really slick. It almost feels like a Metal Gear Solid 5 mission. Of course, you can also just go in guns blazing, or you can actually take your time in this open area and explore a bit, find some intel to make it easier, or do a side mission that'll grant you more weapons or ordnance, like airstrikes. It's a smart way to encourage some exploration and fun.
I thought that mission was good in a dose. I would say it's probably one of the more boring missions just because there was a lot of side stuff. But I think it was a fun addition and a good way of doing an open world mission, unlike Modern Warfare 3.
Find more shootouts that end up actually feeling rewarding. This is much better than the kind of fake Warzone slapped together open-ended missions in Modern Warfare 3's campaign. These here feel thought out, like
There's
really
only
well
one of
done,
them.
and
He's
with some
saying
good
these,
enemy
but there's only
encounters.
one of them.
And while I said a lot of it feels like stuff we've seen before, the characters, the pacing of it, and the music and energy just make it a good ride. There are some really cool moments, some really cool settings. Obviously,
He's not talking
visuals
about the
are
plot at
cranking here.
all.
The modern Call of Duty games, the graphics have been nuts, but the level of detail here is really cool, and the orchestral music, like, surprisingly hits pretty hard. It definitely held my attention. You know, some levels start one way and end up completely differently, or they bounce around in time or in sections to keep the pace blazing from like
That
a
is true.
storytelling
That is a
and
good
gameplay
point.
standpoint. It's pretty cool. Not to mention there are a few parts where the game does get weird, like any Black Ops campaign honestly should. No spoilers, but the game had a few kind of experimental moments that genuinely woke my ass up. Some clever, creative stuff, very much clearly influenced by other games, but done in a way that you just wouldn't expect to see in a game like this usually. One small
I'm
nitpick,
surprised he's
it's
not,
not
like,
that big of a
talking
deal,
about
but
him at
like
all.
the game is surprisingly easy. The enemy AI is not very smart, and
Yeah.
after a while on normal difficulty, I found myself like, what am I doing? I recommend ramping the difficulty up because it felt
Yeah,
like
try
it was
it on
a
veteran and then
Sometimes
you'll,
these games are actually
change.
pretty tough on normal. It's a good way to at least start, but here you're going to want to ramp up the difficulty. My
don't
only
think I
other
unlocked
issue
that door.
is that some pre-rendered cutscenes look like crap. Like they're pixelated and jacked up. Like it looks like it's streaming and the stream glitched out. I don't know why this
Because it's texture streaming.
is a thing. I remember this kind of being an issue in previous games. It must be the engine or just how these games are constructed. I don't know.
As a whole, I think it looks
all
good
in all,
overall,
The game
but-
is about like 8-ish hours, and it's
Yeah.
an entertaining ride.
I would say
It's
7,
a Michael
but-
Bay movie. They always are. You know, some cool characters, some cool explosions. That's what I come to for these campaigns. I don't know where it ranks in like the all-timers, but it's really entertaining and one
good.
of the
It's up
better
there.
campaigns in quite some time. Now, the multiplayer stuff. If you thought Modern Warfare 3 was sweat central, get ready because Black Ops 6 definitely seems like it's going to go beyond that. With the new
Seems like it, but
Omni movement system and the speedier gameplay combined with a really fast time to kill, everyone's
this is why I wanted to watch this. Because clearly, the average player has no idea what they're talking about. Blazing fast time to kill. It's, I believe, the second slowest time to kill, maybe third slowest time to kill out of any Call of Duty game we have. So,
sprinting around like they've consumed a whole kilo of sugar and like
TTK is slower than Modern Warfare 3.
also pure
Actually.
cocaine at the same time. The speed of everything this year just seems nuts. Even compared to the ridiculousness of Modern Warfare 3's multiplayer, Black Ops 6 still manages to feel faster. It's getting to the point where it's almost starting to feel like it's too much. You know, maybe
Oh, see, the chart that I saw, yours based off of ARs could be the same, but the one that I saw, I think it was like 30 milliseconds slower.
it's a little
but
too fast.
That might
and
have changed
twitchy.
since the
I think
beta.
that's a matter of taste, but still, like if that's the sort of COD
But
you're
still,
into,
same.
I think there's a lot to like here. It's overall a solid multiplayer package. We haven't experienced any major bugs or game-breaking issues.
Oh my God.
At its core, everything
at the
works well,
gameplay.
looks good, and feels good to play. And as far as new features go, the Omni movement
You have no
isn't
ammo,
just
brother.
a significant movement change. It's a standout new feature in multiplayer. We
Oh
found
my
ourselves taking
God.
advantage of it way more here than in the campaign, obviously. And it is the big thing. Like I said, there aren't any like major new modes or big loadout
Yeah.
change overhauls. It's mostly
I would say that the loadout has changed quite substantially. But yeah, otherwise, like what he's
all
saying,
the
like
same
no
stuff the
huge
series has been
overhauls.
doing for years, but it does it well here. The fact that it's not completely broken at launch is also noteworthy. They're not reinventing the wheel
That's a
here,
good point.
just focusing on what
I want
works.
these lobbies
The
as well.
multiplayer and zombies offering feels significant, and everything feels good to actually play. So the only real point of contention is the movement and the speed of gameplay, and all the little potentially annoying bits that can hamper your experience with the whole package. So that new Omni movement system I mentioned means that you can sprint at full speed in every direction, and slide and dive in those directions too. Kind of like Max Payne 3, but for what it is, it feels great to do. Diving sideways through a door and gunning down some dudes is incredible.
And so, like, I know, like, some of the Call of Duty community complains about Omni movement, but I think as a whole, an average player will see it and probably not use it much, but when they do, kind of be like, oh, this is cool.
satisfying when you actually rarely pull it off. The new supine maneuver is also fun to use. The game allows a full 360-degree view while you're lying prone, and in general, you move much quicker when you're on all fours, so getting into and out of prone state is pretty fast. And overall, sliding and diving are just straight up better than ever. So if you were sick of everyone running around at full sprint, sliding around corners, and just flopping all over the place, then there's a lot more of it this year. There's less bunny hopping, but that's only
The fact of how slow he is moving in this,
because it's unnecessary now. Slide
kind of cool to see how the other 90% looks at games look.
and dive rules.
That's why we're
Still,
watching
there
it.
is some control to it. Like once you start out and you figure it out, you're gonna be like a wannabe Neo. You're gonna be dodging around all over the place like an idiot. It just looks cool, but those things don't always automatically make you win fights. You gotta use it when you need it.
Oh my god!
On its own, the Omni movement is just a tool, but taken with all the other adjustments they've made to multiplayer this year, it seems like every major decision has kind of been ruled in favor of the twitchy, sweaty gameplay. The lower TTK that we mentioned means that single
It's not a lower TTK.
shot rifles and sniper rifles are even more powerful than before, while shotguns have been rendered more useless than anything other
Yeah, okay, don't
than
listen to this
extreme
part.
close ranges. Auto aim has kind of been nerfed.
Try shotguns
too.
with slugs.
In a bubble, that's an improvement, but when taken with all the other changes, it's made the general skill ceiling much higher than you might be accustomed to. Here's the thing, we don't think any of this is necessarily bad. Pretty much everything we're talking about here makes for a game with a lot of room for skill expression and flexing, and you can pull off some mind-blowing plays here. But man, I feel like at this point, a lot of casual players are going to get left in the dust. At least it's fun though. Now, the maps were controversial in the beta, and they have gone and made a few improvements here and there to make them flow better and fix some of the capture positions to make them more fair, stuff like that, but they don't always
Sounds like an AI script that he's reading. I think this is why I'm watching this. This is what I think the average player
play
thinks.
well with these new Omni movement system stuff. On their own, they're fairly well designed, at least for deathmatch and stuff like that. Certain maps are not so great for domination and hardpoint. Games tend to bottleneck around certain objectives every time. It's still the early days. It's still getting figured out. But yeah, there are at least a few new maps, not just reusing a bunch of remastered Modern Warfare 2 maps like last year, but they're generally pretty small and congested.
Wait,
when
someone got a nuke in his lobby?
they're not
Oh,
cluttered,
that guy
they're
is
way
too
too
boxing
open.
for sure.
It just kind of feels like there's not like the best balance. Still, we do like the looks of a lot of these maps, like the places like Rewind or Red Card look great and generally stick the classic 3-lane structure of a proper COD map here. But there are a lot of tiny maps for the player counts. You're running into people like every few seconds. A lot of times you're getting into gunfights 2 seconds after spawning. I know at this point that's just Call of Duty, but it just feels like especially crazy this year. So if you love
also
Call of
disagree.
Duty at
Well,
its most chaotic, then
somewhat
you'll
disagree.
probably be happy here. And we really can't complain about the general performance and how the game feels to play. The series does sometimes struggle a little bit with the visuals on console in the multiplayer department, and
I haven't played
the
on
recent
console,
games all
can't
have
say
this
that.
problem where they can feel blurry as hell when there's a lot going on. For the multiplayer, we captured it on Xbox Series X, and these issues continue to plague the series here. Readability can tend to be an issue sometimes with I guess the color palette, but also sometimes the blurriness of it.
So when he says readability, I'm pretty sure what he means is being able to see enemies.
It's not an ugly game by any stretch, but on some maps, it can just be kind of hard to tell what you're looking at sometimes. Everything is extremely busy, and it feels like enemy players can sometimes get lost in the scenery. Doesn't ruin the game or anything, but it feels like something that they could maybe improve upon. The only real slowdown we experienced was playing the zombies mode, and that was when there was a full team getting absolutely swarmed by undead.
I've had a couple of slowdowns in zombies.
Most of the time, the game ran very smooth like you'd expect. It sounds like we've had a lot of negative about the multiplayer in Black Ops 6, but it is really solid. It's well made, and for the people that like this sort of super fast gameplay it'll appeal to, I think they'll get a lot out of it. For us, it's a little too
See, this is what I'm saying is I think the Call of Duty niche community really likes these faster paced games, but the whole community as a whole likes the Modern Warfare tactical style shooter games, which can suck.
twitchy. We were reaching the
Yeah, they
limit with
probably
Modern
did not
Warfare
have
3.
motion blur off,
Black
you're right.
Ops 6 went even further. Again, though, the game is well made. It looks great. Most of the operators are pretty cool looking. The music track that plays over the multiplayer menu goes surprisingly hard.
It does
the
go hard.
presentation is pretty solid across the board. One thing that we do appreciate about it, what they've done here, is that there isn't a lot of unnecessary junk. Like, there aren't any gimmicky game modes just to pad the game out. It's just
will
your
be.
basic Call of Duty multiplayer like the old games, filled with the most popular and proven modes and with a decent selection of maps. Your opinion on the quality of them notwithstanding. The offering here all feels very old school Call of Duty, but in a good way. It's not like there's nothing new in the multiplayer. There are a few new modes like HVT, where one player is designated the high value target on each team, and if they're killed, then the opposing team earns points, while protecting them earns your team's points. It's sort of like capture the flag if one of your teammates was the flag. You know, it's not
It is
complex.
nothing
but it's
like
fun.
capture the
And in
flag.
terms of weapons,
But
there are
okay.
33 total guns at launch, with 12 being entirely new. Now, of course, unless you're like a real gun enthusiast, you're not going to know all the differences here, especially now that they're using some made-up names for a lot of the guns. They feel good to use, and they look great. Some of the
Oh my God,
attachments
the aim.
don't make a lot of sense in how they're placed, but overall, the shooting is satisfying. It doesn't feel nearly as powerful as the Modern Warfare reboot. The flash isn't as strong, and the actual firing sounds aren't as intense, but that's probably for the best with just how sped up everything is. We're not going to make
Yeah.
any statements about which weapons are overpowered and which ones are underpowered
Because you wouldn't know, but yeah.
because it's been like a day or so. We can't really make any definitive statements on anything at this point. The only thing we will say at this point, like we mentioned earlier, is that the shotguns do feel like they suck right now. Shotguns are good for zombies still, at least, and yes,
Really
along
good in
with
zombies.
multiplayer, they also brought back round-based zombies. And none of that half-baked stuff from Modern Warfare 3. We're back to classic zombies map action in Black Ops 6, and in contrast to the multiplayer, which we're still working our feelings out on, zombies this year is just straight up a lot of fun. It's basically the mode as we saw it from Cold
And like the whole complaints about the game not being for like classic zombies fan, I think has been diluted a little bit. But these are the people that zombies is
War,
made
so
for in
there are
this
some
game
new
to a
bells and
huge
whistles.
extent.
The objectives are marked on your map. Zombies have health bars, and the maps are generally more open to make zombie slaying easier in general. It's a more forgiving zombies than what you're used to. We're just not crazy about the UI stuff, but at least you can easily turn most of that off in the menu. Everything else is just classic zombies fun. They were even kind enough to include 2 maps to start again. Finally, both these levels are a lot of fun. Liberty Falls is an awesome looking level set in a sunny small town. It's got like these huge open spaces that are ideal for just like mowing down zombies, and unlocking
Casual play.
the Pack-a-Punch is simple. The second map, Terminus, feels more like an intentional throwback. It's set on an abandoned island installation where you have to turn on these generators to reach the Pack-a-Punch.
By the way, the player numbers are higher on Liberty Falls than they are on Terminus, and the views on Liberty Falls are higher than they are on Terminus.
There are more like congested interior locations that put your team at risk, and the map is just massive. It's so big, you can actually jump onto a boat and check out some distant islands. The sort of thing that would just kind of be background scenery in the old zombie games. All the Easter egg stuff wasn't in the game yet when we played yesterday, so we can't comment on any of that, but the basic zombie slaying action
They went to
is
New Zealand
fun,
to play, I
and as
see.
satisfying as it's always been. It's hard to praise the game too much for its back to basic zombies mode because Cold War got this first, but still, compared to how lame and unnecessary the zombie stuff felt in Modern Warfare 3, this is more of a breath of fresh air. And ultimately, that's really it on Black Ops 6 multiplayer. Like, it's fresh, or at least it's fresh enough.
Does he mean zombies?
So far, it seems like we've been more into the zombies offering than the actual multiplayer this year. You know, that's always been our game, and it's just as mindlessly entertaining as it used to be. So with multiplayer, you're either going to love or you're going to hate, but at least they didn't totally screw it up. Some solid zombies and a really good campaign. Black Ops 6 is pretty good. Some people are buying into it. Some people are just playing it on Game Pass. I'm curious to see how it goes down. And again, it is the early days, so we can't comment
Very
on
true.
too much in balancing stuff. That's really going to come down to the community. But again, so far, seems like a solid package overall. Still, that's a before you buy. You know how it goes by now. We give you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinion, and now we
So that's exactly why I wanted to watch that video, because like Twitch chat, people don't think of the game as we think of it. They don't. Like, they just don't. And it is what it is, right? Like, you play the game every single day. You're going to become more accustomed to how it plays and what way it works and everything like that. But at the same time, there's a whole other 90% that don't play the game like we play it. and look at the game like this. And I think that's completely okay. You just don't often get to hear that perspective from someone that makes videos on a Call of Duty game, because most people who make videos on a Call of Duty game make videos about Call of Duty, not a bunch of games. So I don't know, interesting perspective.